Okay, so this morning, many of you already know that a guy named James, who is new on staff here but not new to Narrate, is going to unpack the word. James is a guy that we hired as of September 1st, but kind of oddly made the offer way back in May. He was going to be gone for the summer to really come put his arms around high school culture, Narrate specific. And one of the reasons we felt like James was that guy was because he's a guy who's been pouring into the high school culture in this community for 4 or 5 years already. And here's a neat thing, or at least in my mind it's neat. You might determine that it's not neat at all and wish that I hadn't told the story. But remember we talked about prayer this summer, and we talked about central to prayers, this invitation to communicate the desires to God. That there's this opportunity to not necessarily tell God what to do or twist God's arm or get him to do something that's otherwise reluctant, but there's this sacred tradition in the text of people just communicating like, God, here are my desires. And this would be an example of that for myself personally as well as for the council. Like, going back several months, almost a year, I suppose, we identified, like, here's a guy who seems to have an interest in working for the church. Here's a guy who we think we would love to pour into. And we don't know where he's going to be in 30 years, but he's a young leader that we would love to have influence on. And we just started saying, like, God, it would be our desire to get to hire James. And at the beginning of that prayer, it seemed financially impossible. And then as the last spring unfolded, it seemed like a risk that God was calling us to take. And then in September, it seemed like maybe it wasn't a risk we should have taken. I don't know. Just kidding. I guess I just give that to you to go, like, there's a lot of prayer time behind James. There's a lot of hope. And really the vision is that James would have an opportunity not only to pour into students, but just to be a leader around here. And so if you've been here since Vision Weekend, you've seen that he's taken offering and he's prayed over the service and closed up the service and all that stuff. We just want you to see James not just as a high school guy, but as another resource to you and another leader pouring into this community so that we can pour into our community. So will you give it up for James?
Thank you. I think as I've been in conversation with Adam for, the last year or so, kind of thinking about this and looking at this, it all kind of started making sense and coming together. But if I were to look back, maybe like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, definitely like 5 years ago, this probably wouldn't have been something that I was moving toward. There was the one time that I was at this church conference rally thing in high school, and the guy that he was a passionate speaker, and he was like, "If you feel the call to join the ministry, do it." Oh, okay. But then, as he said that, I felt this burning inside me, this sensation, and it was like my heart was like this fireball that was going to explode and shatter my insides, and flames were in my stomach. And so I was like, oh man, I don't know what that's about. So I talked to my pastor, and I talked to my dad, who was my youth pastor at the time, and I talked to some other adult friends who had some influence in my life. And turns out that I had acid reflux disease. And or heartburn or something, and it was just so I don't know. I think that's how they do it at those things, Lindsay and Jen, when they're telling you people in the second row to do stuff. I think they serve you bad food at those conferences, and then they're like, if the Spirit's moving in you, that's not the Spirit. That's undercooked hamburger. So if I look back at that, it kind of, there are other reasons. I think when I was in high school, in the youth group that my dad was leading, it was, I was not the poster child for attention or listening or anything like that. So, a youth group setting with me and my dad and the rest of the youth group kind of looked funny. I'll show you. I'll act out what it looked like. So if I'm standing, I'm my dad. If I'm sitting down, I'm me, okay? And this is picture me in high school. I had pink hair. I was in a punk band. I had a leather jacket and holes ripped through my knees and all this stuff. And so this is me in high school, just yeah, dude, whatever, man. Fight the system. Oh. My dad's the professional youth pastor and had been for some time. And so he's teaching the youth group, and he's like, well, and Jesus, he went to Galilee, and I'm like, Galileo, Dad. We learned about him this week in school. Like science. Oh, crazy, huh? James, I'm trying to get through it. I'm trying to get through this lesson right here. If you would just pay attention, not distract other people, that would be great. Okay, so anyway, Jesus was leaving Galilee, going to Samaria. Like, Sammy Sosa! Sammy Sosa plays baseball, Dad. I saw him on TV the other day. He's got a corked bat. Crazy, right? Wild. We going to talk about baseball? James, seriously, like, calm down. I mean, sorry, everyone else. My son is an idiot. I don't know. His mother raised him. I'm not sure what happened there. So, anyway, he goes, talks to this. Going to Samaria, he meets this woman at the well. Well, Dad, we have a well. We drink water from a well. Remember that time the septic tank overflowed? That was bad. Like poop water. Ugh. What does that have to do with Jesus? Nothing. And does not have. Anyway, gonna keep on going. And then he started ignoring me. And like it was like I would just talk. It was awful. Like I was just not the picture of like a good like youth group kid. So I don't know, maybe when you look back on like you take a snapshot of where you are now with God or with the church and where you were like 5, 10, 20 years ago, maybe like last year, maybe like last week. Maybe you can kind of feel that same sense of like, oh man, I don't know, like I would never have thought that I'm at this place. I would never have thought that I'm sitting here. I would never have thought that I have this kind of relationship with God that I have right now. Maybe it was like when you were growing up, maybe when God was mentioned, when church was mentioned, that was like a blip on the radar screen that you wanted to get away from. That was like a torpedo coming at you. And you were like, hunt from Red October, go somewhere else, you know, get away from that. Maybe it's just as natural for you to be sitting here as it always has been. Maybe this is something you've grown up in. Maybe this is just something that naturally flows out of your life. Maybe things have just happened in your life that just keep leading you and bringing you to this place with God and with church and with relationship. And I think that's what it comes down to for me. That's why I'm here right now. I think it all comes down to relationship. It all comes down to people taking the time to be intentional and step out with me. So what that kind of looked like for me was growing up, my dad was a youth pastor, so we'd always been in church. And then all of a sudden my dad got a job my junior year of high school that took him out of the church and moved us to Missouri, and which sucks. Don't go there. But anyway, sorry, Missouri. You should be sorry for yourself. But anyway, so we went there, and my dad didn't work for a church anymore, so we didn't have to go to the place that he was working. He was a campus minister. And it was kind of this funky time of like, you know, my dad had always been my youth pastor. And like I had a relationship with my dad, and a good one. And like, so I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what type of youth group I'm going to get into. I just didn't really connect, all this stuff. And as I demonstrated earlier, I have I have self-diagnosed myself with ADHD DE-XL9. It's Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder Deluxe Edition Extra Large 9. So, yeah, it was amazing that I got all the way through that without thinking about something else. But, so like, I have this, I just can't pay attention most of the time. And so I found this thing called Young Life, and it was like, oh, yeah, it's like youth group for hyperactive kids like me. Like this church is youth group for ADD people, which is awesome. That's probably why I'm here. So, I mean, I started going to that, and it was this thing that was fun, and it met my, like, just my personal kind of mindset and the way that my brain worked. But then it wasn't the programming, and it wasn't the like high energy stuff. It wasn't the shooting Twinkies out of slingshots at kids. Like, it wasn't that stuff that that kept me or that changed me or that moved me to this place. I think what changed was that I would come back to Montana from Missouri in the summer, and I didn't connect a whole lot with my young life leaders in Missouri, but my friend up in Kalispell was really involved, and his leaders were just stellar. And they called us, and they, like, every day during the summer almost, it seemed like, we were either hanging out at their workshop. They owned a small place that they made trailers or something, doesn't matter, but we would hang out at their place, and we would like go river rafting with them, and they'd always call us, like, you want to go mountain biking? Do you want to go blow stuff up? Sweet. Yes. So like those relationships just started to build, and it started to build because I think they took the time to get intentional with me. They took the time to call me, like I was staying at my friend's house. When they knew my friend Tim was out of town, they would still give me a call and be like, James, I know you're probably just hanging out right now. Let's go do something. And they just made an effort to get into my life. And I think that's probably the biggest reason that I ended up here. Because I think from that, I started leading in Helena, and that's just grown, and I think given me the skills that I have right now. And so I think in light of this series, in light of the stuff we've been talking about organic kingdom bringing and about just mattering where you are and getting into people's lives and just bringing hope to the places that you just naturally go to. I think it kind of begs the question of, like, where does the intentional meet the organic, or where does the organic meet the intentional? Because there's got to be some crossover. There's got to be some spot where, like, getting intentional, making time for people, meets growing organic relationships with them. There's got to be some crossover there. So, and then also in part of this is for me to talk about the kind of, this isn't going to be like a fleshing out of like the Narrate student ministry, but it's going to be like, this is the motivation. This is like the root of where, this is like where my philosophy is coming from on student ministry too. So let's look at the text and see what Jesus has to say about this kind of intentionality. And I don't think it's a whole lot of like looking at exactly what Jesus said. There's not going to be a whole lot of that today. There will be some, but it's kind of just looking at the model, looking at how Jesus did what he did, how he did his ministry. So first we're going to look at John 1. This is John. He's just fleshing out like why this matters, like in the beginning. He's just say, why does this person matter? And so he starts off, the Word was first, the Word present to God, God present to the Word. The Word was God, in readiness for God from day one. So he lays out like, okay, the Word. This is Jesus. He's talking about the Word matters. This is God. And this is, he goes on to say, the creating power, the light that gives life to all men. And then he comes, and I think it's also important to look at how he comes, how he matters. So in verse 14, he says, the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. I think in the original language, it says like he put up his tent in the middle of us. You know, he moved into our neighborhood. Like Jesus came and moved next door. And this is part of this kind of intentional, organic kingdom bringing, that God didn't expect us to continually move toward him and to continually come toward him. He said, I'm going to come to you. Like, I'm going to come get into your life. I'm going to move into your neighborhood, get next door to you. And that matters. And I think that's powerful stuff when we look at how we want to matter in our community as well. So I think there's more in this too. I think just the way that Jesus interacts with the disciples and how he calls them is unique to this kind of intentional, organic kind of kingdom bringing. So let's look at Luke 5. This is when Jesus is calling out Peter. So when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. Simon answered, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets. When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man. For he and his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, Don't be afraid. From now on you will catch men. So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. So what Jesus did here, again, he's like moving into their neighborhood. But then he's going beyond that, and he's moving into their workplace. Like, this boat is these guys' office, This is where they work every day. This is where they live every day. And Jesus is getting intentional and stepping into that life. Jesus is saying, I'm going to step into where you are. I'm going to walk with you in the place that you're at. So that's what he does here with these fishermen. And then beyond that, the way that he calls them to come with him and do the same thing. He says to them, come and get intentional in my life. Come follow me. Come learn from me in a life-on-life kind of way. If we look back at John, there's some great examples of this when John talks about the calling of the disciples. So the next day, John was there again with two of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, Look, the Lamb of God. When the two disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, What do you want? They said, Rabbi, which means teacher. Where are you staying? Come, he said, and you will see. They went and they saw where he was staying and spent that day with him. So again, Jesus is just saying, come with me. Come live life with me, and I will live life with you. We will go through this thing together. He goes on and he's talking to Philip. Next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, Follow me. This follow me stuff is just come live life with me. When we see Jesus talking and going through the rest of his ministry, he'll talk to thousands of people, and he'll talk to hundreds of people, and he'll talk to large groups, and then he retreats back with his guys. He retreats back with this small group of disciples. And even inside of that, he's got a more intentional, three, Peter, James, and John, that he's pouring into. And all these 12, he's just pouring into these guys. And I think this kind of life on life, come walk with me, come step into my life, and I'll step into your life. This kind of walk is, I think it's best summed up, the reasoning behind it is best summed up by a guy named Robert Coleman who wrote a book kind of mapping out Jesus' plan for evangelism and the way that Jesus related to people and the way Jesus got his message out. And he says that one living sermon is worth 100 explanations. So when he's talking to these guys, when he's asking these guys to live with him, it's because that makes a bigger difference than a guy with a microphone on a stage talking about something, living life with people is what matters. And his disciples took this on, and when Jesus left and they start planning churches, they're going to live with people. They're going to live in these communities and talk to people and relate to people in the marketplace and in the temple. And this is the way that they do these things. And this is exemplified, I think, when in the letter to the Thessalonians, where it's just this mindset that they brought, and it just says, we loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you had become so dear to us. Sharing your life is a heavy thing to do. Just sharing, letting people in, getting into other people's lives as well. It's a tough thing to do, and I think that's part of what we're called to walk alongside people and to walk into life with people. So maybe when we're talking about relationships, we have these organic relationships, and maybe they've come out they've been watered by something else. Maybe they've been in your backyard, your metaphoric backyard. This is your metaphoric relationship that's organic, like the plant thing up there. Tried to get the one that looked most like the Dooley Bob. But so this is an organic relationship that maybe you just have found yourself in. Maybe it's not something that you took a lot of time to water or to grow. Maybe it's someone you work with. Maybe it's someone you live with in the dorms. Maybe it's just a friendship that like you grew up together as kids, you know, and it just got watered and it just grew, and all of a sudden it's in your backyard and you've got this organic relationship. And then you look and you're like, well, where does intentionality come into that? Like, it's just natural. It's just organic. But I mean, I think we're called to get intentional and say, like, maybe this relationship is one that you've got to take your skills, and this is your metaphoric skill bottle thing. I don't know, represents intentionality. So, and then you've got this organic relationship and you want to pour into it more. Maybe that just means like getting real with someone and saying like, you know, I want this relationship to be something that we can both grow in. Maybe we should read a book together and talk about it. Maybe we should like set aside like Tuesday afternoons and go get coffee like every week, and let's keep maintaining this, and let's keep staying intentional in this, and let's keep moving towards something in this relationship. Maybe like this doesn't always flow from organic to intentional. Maybe you've got a skill set. Maybe you've got like a natural bent. Maybe you have, you see someone at work or in school or someone that you just interact with that you're like, man, I want to get to know that person. I want to pour into that person. Or maybe you say like, I want that person to pour into me. Like I want to grow through a relationship. And so here's your intentional thing, and you got this watering jug. And so you got to get out there and start watering. Start like asking to go to coffee or hang out or watch a football game or something, you know? And this message can be really simple, and it can sound really like, oh, wow, I went to church and learned like hanging out with people is good. Great. You know? Like, but it's harder there's a difference between just hanging out in this like organic kind of way that we're pretty used to and being intentional and getting into people's lives. I think Eugene Peterson, he's a learned theologian. I call him Gino Peets. He's like my homeboy. Gino Peets, what? So he says that it's easier to find guides, someone to tell you what to do, than someone to be with you in a discerning, prayerful companionship as you work it out yourself. This is what spiritual direction is. So the way I understand this is that during the last 3 summers, I've been guiding up in British Columbia for a mountaineering kind of organization thing, and it's part of Young Life, and so it's this outreach mountaineering thing. So as a guide, I have this way of like I've been trained. I know how to tie ropes, tie knots. I know how to kick really good steps in the snow so people don't slip. I know how to self-arrest with an ice axe if I fall. I know how to walk across a glacier. Like, I know all these things. Like, I've been trained in them. And so my job is to relay that information and tell the participants that, like, when it's raining, put your rain gear on because you'll get wet if you don't. Like, but the difference is that I, as a guide, I have this knowledge that they don't have. And so when it starts raining, I've already got my rain gear on because I've felt it. I just feel it in the air with my super guide sense, you know. But like, I have my rain gear on, and they're like, "What do I do?" Put your rain gear on. It's in the bottom of my backpack. Get it out. Like, so I mean, and then when we're living in camp, it's like they set up their tents, and we set up this big, ugly yellow thing called the McKinley Fly that we, as the guides, stay in. It doesn't have a bottom. It's kind of ghetto, but whatever. So like the tents, if it gets wet and rainy, like the tents get soaked because that's where the kids are. That's where the participants are. It just gets wet. I don't know what they do in there. I don't know if they're like, they don't want to go outside to pee or something. I don't know what happens, but those tents just get wet and they just get soaked. So I stay out of there and I stay in my like guide world. But what happens is that like I don't have the same trip that they have, you know? I don't have the same experience that they have. I don't go through the struggles that they go through. I don't go through the same process of self-discovery that they go through. And I mean, in some situations that's appropriate. I'm not like, yeah, it's required essentially in that environment. But I don't know if it's always required in the spiritual life. Because I see these kids' leaders, and instead of guiding them and instead of standing at a distance, these leaders who have been walking in these guys' lives, they stay with them in the tent, and they get soaked. And I'm like, better you than me, because someone's got to do it. And they stay, and they have that experience, and they have those struggles, and they get wet when the kids get wet, and they, like, their legs burn when the kids' legs are burning, and they, like, feel the same pain, and they walk with them in that. And that's where the growth happens. I mean, it's in going through those things together. It's in experiencing those things side by side. So, I mean, my hope for the student ministry is that I can walk alongside and in the lives of high school students, and that it wouldn't be just me, that people who are interested, and that people who find that they have these skills, and people who find that they have some desire to influence high school students will come alongside and do that as well, and enter into people's lives. And beyond that, I hope that like this community can like embrace that kind of culture. Like I think we already have. Like this is like walking in people's lives, stepping in and going through the pain and the joy and the fear and the prayer, like with people, and not standing on the outside saying like, you know what you need to do. You got to do this. I mean, there's a point for that, and there's a point for that in walking with someone, and there's a point for that kind of wisdom. But I think it comes out of going through stuff with them, you know, going through that stuff with people. So that's my kind of goal, that's my aim for the student program and for this community. I think when Jim Rayburn, the founder of Young Life, started, and he started talking about this kind of ministry, and back in 1940, he said, like, I look ahead and I don't see Young Life existing in 10 or 15 years. Someone was like, why? That doesn't make sense. Why are you making something that's not going to exist? He said, well, because I think that like every church is going to buy into this type of thing. Like every church is going to buy into hanging out with kids in this way and getting into kids' lives in a one-on-one, personal kind of discipleship way. And so by the time that they all catch it, I mean, we're out of business, and that's a good thing, you know. So, I mean, it's not my goal to like destroy Young Life. Like, Ben, you're fine, but like, it's that kind of ministry that I think has been most powerful in my life, and that I see as a more sustainable type of ministry through adulthood and into integration with the larger church body. You know, is that people are pouring into people. And through that, relationships are formed. And through those relationships, a community is formed. So, I mean, that's my goal. And it may sound simple, and it may sound like that's something easy, but it's not. So I would encourage you just think on that. Look for those opportunities to really delve into people's lives and go through stuff with them. Look at the skills you've got. Look at the natural bents. Look at the organic relationships you already have. And I mean, my hope is that we would just move together toward that kind of walking with each other. So I'm going to pray. Thanks, God, for this community and this group of people. And I pray that you'll just bring those opportunities to us and show us when to be intentional in relationship and when to let organic relationships just continue to develop. I pray that you will just continue to build this kind of community that pours into each other and that enters into each other's lives and that goes beyond that and enters into the lives of the people they work with and the people they go to school with and the people they play on a team with. And I pray that you can just give us that kind of courage to do the hard stuff that, takes another step and that takes us getting out of our comfort zone. So, yeah, thanks, God.